Hello there, this is Teacher Win and welcome to the fourth lesson about genetics. Before you continue watching this video, make sure you've already watched lesson 1 to lesson 3 about genetics. For this video, we are going to learn about Mendelian genetics key terms and Mendel's law of inheritance. So before we start the lesson, make sure to prepare your book. So the lesson will cover the pages 56 to 58 of Mastering Science 3A. Ready? Before we start with our lesson, so let's have first a short review about what traits did Mendel study in relation to genetics. In page 55 of your Mastering Science 3A, so you have there the 7 traits that Mendel studied using his garden pea plants. So what are these traits? Number 1 is your flower color. Number 2, seed color. Number 3, seed shape. Number 4, pod color. Number 5, pod shape. Number 6, stem height. And number 7, flower placement. Okay? Also, it's very important to know what are the words that we are going to use in this lesson. So let's read the words one by one. So M3, I want you to repeat after me. Let's start with number 1. Gene, gene, allele, allele, purebred, purebred, homozygous, homozygous, hybrid, hybrid, heterozygous, heterozygous, dominant allele, dominant allele, recessive allele, recessive allele, phenotype, phenotype, genotype, genotype. So let's begin with number 1 and number 2 of your key terms. Number 1 is gene. What is a gene? A gene is the factor that carry all traits, and allele is two different forms of the same gene. So what are this? Where can we find this gene and allele? So in your second lesson, we've learned already the structure coming from the biggest to the smallest. We're in from the cell, the nucleus, the chromosome, to DNA, and also your gene is a section or a part of your DNA. So like for example, I can have here like a gene for your hair color. This side or this area can also be like a gene for your eye color, or this area can also be a gene for your height. So a gene is a section or a part of your DNA, which can be found in your chromosome. And where can you find your chromosome? So your chromosome can be found at the center of your cell, that is so-called your nucleus. So let's use the analogy of pens in describing gene and allele. Okay, so what you see right now are two pens or two ballpoint pens. Okay, so if I'm going to ask you, what are the different things that you can ask or that you can observe about the pens? So, number one is you can say, I can see the names, or shall we say, the brand names of your pen. What else? I can also see there, like the color of your pens. So, another thing, speaking of your brand names, what are the different brand names that you can see there? So you have there the brand name Pilot, and then the brand name SDSU Aztec. And about the color, so we have the color black and the color red. Okay, so how do we relate or connect this analogy to your gene and allele? So remember that your gene is a section or a part of your DNA. So your pens here will represent as your DNA, and the brand names here and the color represents your genes, wherein your brand names has different or two alleles. So your pilot here and your SDSU Aztec here, these are your alleles, alleles of your brand names. Your black here and your red here are also alleles of your color of the pen. Using the experiment of Mendel, so we have here the allele for the flower color. So your flower color here is the gene, and then your flower color has two alleles. We have the purple and also the white flower. So in our example here, your chromosome number 1. So we can find here, this is the section wherein the allele can be found. So the allele for purple flowers are found here, and then the allele for the white flowers are found here. So this area is what we call your locus. Locus, it's Locus. So your locus is the area or the location on your chromosome where you can find that allele or specific allele. Also, with your chromosome number 4, so in this locus here, so you can find the two allele for your stem length, that is your tall and also your short. Now, you might be asking why there are two alleles for the same gene. Remember that parents, meaning the mother and the father, contribute to the development of your offspring. So, looking at our example here, so we can say that this chromosome here may come from the father's side, and this comes from the mother's side. And also with this side can be from the father and also from the mother. So this is what I mean by both parents, the mother and the father, contribute to the development of your offspring. So number 3 and number 4 of the key terms, we have purebred or homozygous. And number 4, we have your hybrid or heterozygous. If we talk about purebred or homozygous, it means unmixed breeding or it's pure, or shall we say 100%. So example, I have here a circle. So if I color this circle red, so we can say that this circle is pure. This one is purebred, meaning this one is 100% red color. Or if I have here another circle and it's color white, so this one is purebred also, or homozygous, or shall we say 100% white. So this is what I mean by purebred or homozygous. Number 4 is hybrid. So again, I have here a circle. However, I only shade this part red. So this is what you call your hybrid. So there is a section of the circle that is not colored. So I can say 1/4 white color, or shall we say 3/4 red color, right? 1/4 is represented as 25%, and 3/4 is represented as 75%. Or another way, it's like this. I have here a circle divided into half. So we can say it's like 50% white and 50% red. So this is also another example of your hybrid. So let's use the experiment of Mendel to describe this purebred and hybrid. Okay, so in your parental generation, so Mendel used the pure purple flower, so meaning this is 100%, and pure white, which is also another 100% white, in order for Mendel to know what are the offspring of these flowers. So using the pure purple and the pure white combination, so parental generation can be called as your purebred flowers. And as a result, so Mendel observed that the flowers that came from the pure purple and pure white, all of them are purple flowers. Wherein at first, they were thinking that it's also 100% purple. But actually, when Mendel tried to experiment this first filial generation, so he observed that on the second filial generation, or the second offspring, there is already a white flower among the purple flower. So therefore, Mendel concluded, after he performed many experiments, that in your first filial generation, it was already a hybrid example, because even if you only see the purple flowers there, but these flowers carry the trait of your pure white flower. So as a result, this explains why does there is a white flower among this purple flower. Next part. So number 5 and number 6 key terms. So we have your dominant and recessive. So I think you've learned already this one in your previous video about dominant or recessive, wherein dominant is your strong trait, or another way to say it is observed trait, a trait that can be seen. And recessive is like your weak trait, or the trait that has disappeared, or the trait that can't be seen. So if you look at your page 55 of your book, so looking at the results here, your F1 generation. So when you combine the round seed and the wrinkled seed, only one trait appeared. So only all round, or only round seed. So wherein you can see here the round seed. So your round seed here is an example of your dominant trait, and the trait that has disappeared or the trait that you cannot see is your recessive trait. So you can see here is the dominant trait, but inside this round seed, you have here the trait from your wrinkled seed, wherein the trait of your wrinkled seed can be seen in your second generation. So when Mendel experimented this hybrid round combined with another hybrid round, so it was revealed that there were now two sets of seeds. You have your round seeds and also your wrinkled seeds. It's the same with all F1 generation. So even if you can see only yellow, it does not mean this is 100% yellow, but it has a trait of green seed. However, in this case, yellow is the dominant and the green seed is recessive. Now let's talk about the different law of inheritance that Mendel proposed as he gathered, as he collected the results coming from his experiments. So what is the law of dominance? Law of dominance states that when there is a dominant allele and a recessive allele inherited together for a particular gene, the dominant allele will be seen or expressed. So if you have two traits, one strong trait and one weak trait, so the strong trait will be exposed or the strong trait can be seen. This is what you mean by the law of dominance by Mendel. Another way to represent this law of dominance is that dominant allele is represented by a big letter and recessive allele is represented by a small letter. So when you are going to write a representation or a symbol for your dominant allele, you use the big letter. If you want to represent or write a symbol for your recessive allele, you use your small letter. So like for example, so you can look at page 55 for more information about the different traits. But for this slide, I will focus only on the allele of the flower color. So in your page 55, we know already that the allele for the flower color, so we have your white and purple. So which do you think is the dominant trait? Is it the white or the purple? Okay, so the dominant trait is your purple. So if the trait is dominant, you write it in a big letter. What's the second allele for the flower color? That is white. So if that allele is recessive, you represent it with a small letter. In writing the letters for the allele, you have to make sure you use the same letter, but only the size differs because for the dominant, it's big letter, and for the recessive, you use a small letter. We use the same letter because we are talking only about the same genetic trait, which is your flower color. Another thing, here's my tip. If you're going to use letter, actually you can use A, B, C, D, E, F, G, any letters of the alphabet. So it will be easy for you to decide which letter to use. So I want you to look at the first letter, the first letter of the dominant trait. So our dominant trait here is purple. So, and it starts with letter P. So letter P is the letter to be used to express dominant or recessive. So if I have here one dominant and one recessive, what do you think is the baby or the offspring or the gene expression here? So it will be the purple flower. So wherein if we combine these two, so remember your allele, it's a contribution of both parents. So this one comes from the father and this one comes from the mother. So the baby will have two alleles of that trait. So you have coming from the father and coming from the mother. So going back to the definition of law of dominance, if you have one dominant allele and one recessive allele, the dominant allele will be seen. So this is what I mean by this part. So we have a purple offspring because we have one dominant allele, which is the purple color. Now, let's talk about the allele of the seed color. So we knew it already that there are two alleles. We have the yellow and the green. So which do you think is the dominant allele? Is it the yellow or the green? You can look at page 55 of your book. So in your page 55, so it has been shown that your yellow is the dominant allele. I use capital or big letter Y because yellow starts with letter Y and it is the dominant allele. And for green, we represented it with a small y because it is a recessive trait or a recessive allele. So what do you think is the baby or the offspring? Or what do you think is the seed color if you combine yellow and green? So it will be yellow. Why yellow? Because yellow here is a dominant trait and the green here is just a recessive trait. So meaning your green here will just stay low or will be hidden because you have here the stronger trait, which is your yellow trait. Okay, one more, last. So allele of the P stem. So which is your dominant? Which one is your recessive? Short. Short, is it recessive or dominant? Okay, so your short here is an example of your recessive. So, and your long here is an example of your dominant allele. So, since long here is my dominant allele, so I use the letter L. So my short here, so the short allele here is represented by a small letter L. This is not I, it's small letter L. Now, so what do you think is the baby or the offspring? So it will be long, but how do you write it? Small l, then big L, or big L, then small l? So you will write it this way. So if it happens that you write it this way, recessive first, then dominant here. So in writing the so-called genotype here, it should start with the dominant trait first, then followed by the recessive trait. Okay, so And lastly, we have your phenotype and your genotype. So your phenotype is the physical characteristics that you see. So what you see right now, or what you see about yourself, that is an example of your phenotype. If you can see your face and you have a black eye or a brown eye, so that is a phenotype. If you can see that your hair is straight or your hair is wavy, so that is a phenotype example, because your phenotype is the characteristics that you can see about yourself. And your genotype, that is the genetic makeup, which is represented by letters. So we have here examples of your phenotype and your genotype. So your round seed and your wrinkled seed, these are the allele for the shape or the shape of your seeds, wherein your round seed is your dominant trait or the dominant allele, and your wrinkled seed is your recessive allele or recessive trait. So your round seed, so if you can see the round seed, so you are going to represent it with the big letter. So it can be big letter R or a big letter R in front, followed by small letter R, or double big letter R because it's a dominant trait. If you can see only a wrinkled seed, that is the phenotype, so you are going to write it in a small letter R. So in your phenotype, so if you can see the purple flower is your dominant trait. So I can write it in big P, or a combination of one big P and one small p, or double PP. If you can see only white flower, which is recessive, so I can write it in small p or double small p. So the next law of Mendel in his law of inheritance is the law of segregation. Segregation meaning separate. Segregation meaning separate. So it states that every individual or every organism or every plant or every animal or every person has two alleles of each gene. When gametes are produced, gametes are your sex cells, your sperm and your egg cells. So each gamete receives one of these alleles. So what does it mean by this law of segregation? So let's go back again to this example, the gene for your color or for your flower color. So remember that this is only the gene for your flower color, wherein this comes from the father and this comes from the mother. So both father and the mother contributed to the allele of your flower color. So another way to represent this second law of inheritance is by looking at this example. So let's consider this 2 capital P as the father side and these 2 small p's from your mother side. So in this case, the father side can share this one allele, and the mother side can also share this one allele. So in your law of segregation, it goes this way. So one allele is contributed by the father and one allele is contributed by the mother side. So the offspring will have one allele from the father and one allele from the mother. Or the father side can contribute this one allele and the mother side can give this one allele, so the offspring can have these alleles. Or the father side can give this one allele or this allele, and the mother side can give this one allele, so the offspring can have one from the father and one from the mother. Or the father can give this one allele and the mother can give this one allele and the baby can have this allele, this set of alleles. So this is what you mean by your Mendel's second law of inheritance. One allele is contributed by the father and one allele is contributed by the mother, so that the offspring or the baby can have a set of alleles coming from the father and the mother. Before we go to the part 2 of your lesson number 4, so let's have first a short recap about the key terms. So we have your gene, allele, purebred, hybrid, dominant trait, recessive trait, phenotype, and genotype. So M3, I want you to understand these terms before you move to the part 2, because most of these terms will be used when we talk about Punnett square. So if you want to watch this video again, you are free to do so until you understand each of these genetic key terms.